Probably giving Jeremy Hunt some ideas about how to get money out of it.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're counting down our picks for Frankie Boyle's most brutal attacks on the political elite.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
That was too much. You're not going to like the end of this.
John Prescott. In this classic episode of Mock the Week, Frankie took aim at John Prescott, then still a key figure in British politics.
It was actually John Prescott was the person who came out and was the person to condemn it.
He was mocking Prescott's morals and his appearance, in a typical joke you'd struggle to get away with putting on TV now.
But that's pretty bad if the only sort of moral conscience in your nation is a man who has done things to his body that has turned his internal organs into patty.
It is bizarre that John Prescott had the moral high ground in any situation, but of course, it's not like Frankie hasn't attacked most frontbenchers in Parliament regardless of party.
A man who couldn't wear a tie and a belt on the same day or he'd turn into sausages.
He's told plenty of jokes about Tony Blair as well, including another bit on Mock the Week about who Blair was choosing to spend his holidays with. The 2016 US election.
Donald Trump sort of looks like someone playing a president in a porno.
Frankie Boyle was wheeled out by the BBC on many occasions to make shows mocking the UK's various elections, but he also did a special about the 2016 US election, rife with jokes about Trump.
Trump alienated the Republican base. There were Republican politicians who didn't vote for him. Those are some of the worst people in the world.
Like anybody else outside America, he could only watch in horror as they voted for Donald Trump to be the next president. In his closing monologue, he reflected on America as a whole and how it came to the position it was in 2016, and even made a very close to the line joke about how David Bowie must have chosen to die that year because he knew what the future had in store.
David Bowie willed himself to die like a dolphin.
It really did look like the end of civilization was nigh when Trump emerged victorious.
James Corden continuing to perform an endless monologue, caked in the flung excrement of the 54th Southern Highlanders.
Gavin Williamson.
Nothing comforts me more than knowing my government has pioneered a child sifting algorithm. Up till now, the only technology used to hastily grade that many teenagers was Jeffrey Epstein's one-handed binoculars.
In this episode of New World Order, the hot topic of the week was the COVID exams disaster. In a nutshell, as all exams in the UK were cancelled due to lockdown, an AI was brought in to estimate pupils' predicted grades. It gave poorer kids worse grades and richer kids better ones, in an enormous controversy.
If Gavin Williamson had an ounce of decency, he'd tell all the students in the UK the truth, that none of the exam results mean a thing.
The man responsible was Gavin Williamson, and Frankie pulled no punches when it came to Williamson's serial dishonesty and mishandling of the fiasco. As well as that, he talked about the poor state of the country and the wider world in the aftermath of the pandemic, with the future looking bleaker than ever for Britain's youth.
These are the jobs of the future, sorting dissidents' kidneys in a Chinese extermination hospital.
Message to Conservative voters.
I want to leave you with this. Conservative voters, you have destroyed this country.
This was Frankie's special about the UK's 2015 election, which saw the demise of the coalition government and a Tory majority under David Cameron.
We're about to birth the first generation of babies that will be regularly woken by the nocturnal screams of their parents.
He had a message for all those who voted for the Conservatives though, ridiculing them for their decision and producing stereotype after stereotype of what Tory voters are like.
And you did this with your affordable four-wheel drives, your Coldplay albums, your canvas trousers.
According to him, they're a bunch of middle-class show-offs with no self-awareness who have ruined the UK for the negligible gain of their houses being worth more and their taxes going down.
Your James Corden, your Sky Atlantic, your mistress, your num's smile, your diazepam, your wanking glove.
Years on, and it's safe to say the majority of things didn't improve with another 9 years of Tory rule, and Frankie was spot on. The SNP. It's not just Westminster Frankie attacks. As a Scot, he's got plenty of opinions about what's going on in Holyrood too.
Just like all the candidates kind of lack Nicola Sturgeon's kind of connection with the electorate. because like she was like an archetypal Scottish person. You know, like she looked like a fire alarm had gone off halfway through her haircut.
In 2023, Nicola Sturgeon left the top job as First Minister of Scotland after 8 years, kicking off a leadership election with 3 candidates aiming to replace her: Humza Yousaf, Ash Regan and Kate Forbes. Frankie Boyle was brought onto the last leg to give his thoughts on the SNP leadership election and the candidates.
Yeah, he's sort of the progressive candidate, but basically he's presided over the health service where now the average ambulance waiting time is 6 hours.
As we know now, Yousaf was victorious, but there was a lot of discussion about Forbes and some of her, shall we say, old-fashioned beliefs, including that sex outside of marriage is immoral.
It's terrible, you know, I mean, if she's against gay marriage, it seems really weird, because basically the national dress of Scotland is a man in a skirt sucking a bag of
Lib Dems. In another New World Order monologue, Frankie went over the biggest political events of 2018. First to get attacked was Saudi Arabia, as well as the British government's habit of selling weapons to them no matter what they do.
In a year of increasing political polarisation, it was difficult to remember sometimes that the Lib Dems still actually exist.
But then he moved on to the Liberal Democrats, always fertile ground for comedy. It's true that in 2018, the Lib Dems were almost completely politically irrelevant.
The difference between a Lib Dem meeting and a wife-swapping party is that a wife-swapping party generally involves at least 4 people.
And finally, it was time for Dominic Raab and his baffling decision to resign over his own Brexit deal. Well, at least Raab seemed to admit that he was a terrible negotiator.
To be fair to Dominic Raab, he didn't want to be Brexit Secretary, but he didn't have the negotiating skills to turn it down.
Jeremy Hunt. One of the most infamous health secretaries in recent memory, Jeremy Hunt has been a popular punching bag for years.
We've not upgraded the security properly, and we've been running the NHS on Windows XP, so people have probably been told that they're dying by a helpful paperclip.
Frankie was hosting this 2017 episode of Have I Got News For You, when the biggest story of the week was the NHS WannaCry cyber attack. He had plenty of one-liners about the underfunding of the NHS that made it vulnerable to this kind of attack in the first place, before moving on to Hunt's role.
What must it be like being Jeremy Hunt at the moment? Imagine he goes into hospital. He'll be the first person to have a sprained wrist treated anally.
Jeremy Hunt remains one of the most hated members of the Tory cabinet, thanks to so many bad memories of his time cutting the NHS so much that it now barely functions.
Sorry, Mr. Hunt, this is going to involve a bit of a run-up. Luckily, our computers are down, so there's no record of what's about to happen to you.
Thatcher's Funeral. This was years before Margaret Thatcher's eventual death in 2013, with the Mock the Week panel talking about how Thatcher had been planning for her vast funeral years before she perished.
Give her a state funeral, because a lot of people will want to pay their last respects, and a lot more people will want proof that she is really dead.
There were rumours for a long time that she'd be giving a state funeral like Churchill, which ultimately didn't come to pass because of her deeply controversial legacy.
It'll be the first time that the 21-gun salute shoots the coffin.
Frankie had a few opinions about Maggie though, as you'd expect, namely that nowhere near as much money should be spent on Thatcher's funeral as eventually was, and that she was definitely going to go to hell.
For $3 million, they could give everyone in Scotland a shovel, and we would dig a hole so deep that we could hand it over to Satan personally.
Tory leadership election.
We're going to have the next Prime Minister chosen by a very small group of elderly people during a heatwave.
In 2022, the country was gripped in the chaos of not one, but 2 Tory leadership elections. This was an episode of The Last Leg following the first of those 2, in which Liz Truss eventually replaced Boris Johnson after winning the race against Sunak, thanks to the Tory grassroots.
And it's got to be either Rishi Sunak, a guy whose greatest desire in life is to be pegged by Thatcher's ghost, or Liz Truss, who would Who would be the first Prime Minister to forget to breathe and just die?
Also on the show was Tory moderate Baroness Warsi, who had her own opinions about the election, including a very poorly aged statement that Truss wasn't the worst possible candidate. She's also hilariously called out by Frankie for being a Tory in the first place, given the state the country is in.
Only so much I take. I'm going to need therapy at the end of all of this.
For being a Tory?
For being...
A lecture on power.
In the United States, they elected Joe Biden, despite the fact that he's moments from death.
In this Dave series, comedians were tasked with presenting a lecture that bore the title of a genuine lecture, but which they'd written themselves. Frankie Boyle was given the topic of power, and since he spent his whole career speaking truth to it, he was the ideal choice. He started off by lampooning powerful people who haven't been elected to their positions, like Jeff Bezos, and then moves on to politicians.
Keir Starmer has all the authority of the Do Not Tumble Dry label.
First up was Keir Starmer, criticised by Boyle for his unsuitability as a leader. After that, it was Boris Johnson, and then former Home Secretary Priti Patel. Nobody was safe from his wrath.
So Priti Patel has real power, especially if you're a refugee. She's the only woman in Britain who can bring herself to orgasm by imagining a slow puncture at sea.
Let us know in the comments what your favourite Frankie Boyle joke of all time is.
You can't be liberated as a nation without having liberation for everyone, and that means minorities, that means gay people, that means everybody.
Yeah.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.